Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. And here we are at episode 17, where we are going to talk about beliefs, 10 beliefs that lead to a thriving marriage. I rooted around in my mind for my favorite ways of thinking about, some of my favorite ways of thinking about my marriage, my man, or just our relationship. And these are the ways of thinking that I have found really, really serve our relationship. I didn't necessarily come to my marriage with these beliefs in place. I kind of developed them over time. And again, I found them completely, I want to say, imperative for having the kind of amazing marriage that my husband and I have together. And I've also I've chosen these particular beliefs to share with you today, with the understanding that some of these are often missing or maybe kind of weak for highly sensitive women in their relationships. Certainly not everybody, but just so listen in with an ear for which ones, you might not be fully believing in at this point, which ones might be a little weak for you. Because I really want this episode to really help you specifically. So I will run through these beliefs one at a time, and I'm not going to go into great detail on all of them because as you might hear by listening, we could probably talk about these beliefs for days. I mean, each one has so much in it. But I will share some of the ways that not believing this, like each one, can negatively impact a relationship, and how believing them will positively or does positively impact a relationship. So again, I really want you to be able to decide for yourself if they might be helpful for you to adopt or not. I think you'll find that they'll be helpful to adopt for everybody. But some of them you might already have adopted. You might already believe. Did you actually know that you can just adopt beliefs? Yes, you can indeed. It obviously can take some conscious effort, but I do it all the time. It's a thing that I do. And it's really consciously being able to take on board a new belief it's really the only way I could have ever, made it here to be hosting a podcast that gets heard by hundreds of listeners every week. Like, that was not a number of years ago. That was not even a possibility for me, right? Because I didn't believe that I was someone who could do that. I had to actually consciously believe on purpose that, oh yeah, I have it in me to make a podcast. Like, I could be that kind of person who does that, who leads in that way, who helps people in that way. Yeah. And I'll be okay in front of all these people, right? I had to choose to think that way on purpose. All right. So you can do the same with any belief that you find might serve you. So let's just dive in with no further ado. So the first belief that I want to share with you today is this: taking care of me, taking care of myself, is taking care of us. So when we highly sensitive women don't believe this, we don't necessarily take care of ourselves very well. Right? That's a possibility that we wouldn't end up taking care of ourselves. What I see is we don't necessarily ask for the space and the time that we need to decompress. to like go for a long walk or meditate or, just go be in your room quietly by yourself, right? We don't actually create that time for ourselves. We don't ask for it. We don't claim it. And though that time for you, that time to decompress, to recenter is so key to being your best self. I think you all probably know this, right? Or like even a decent version of yourself, right? Like you've probably heard me say that we sensitive people can be insensitive when we aren't centered, right? Like we might get a little irritable, a little grouchy, maybe not so fun to be around. If we're like overwhelmed and stressed, which is, it can be a common thing, right? Especially if we're not creating and honoring our need for space and time to ourselves or to do the thing, whatever our jam is, that gets us back to feeling centered. So, I think one thing I see, something that I see regularly is we spend a lot of time and energy focusing on taking care of our partner or our family. Right? So that's one of the things that if we're not believing that taking care of me is taking care of us, we might end up spending tons of time taking care of the family or our partner. And I mean, by taking care, I mean a whole range of things, just like feeling like we need to be present with them most of the time, right? When we're doing that, I know I've been guilty of that in the past. I forget, right? And it takes away from my capacity to be at my best and to feel good, right? So another thing that happens when we're not believing this is we will become resentful and exhausted, right? And that's not fun for anybody at all. It's not fun for you, especially, which is most important. And it's not fun for your partner, husband. It's not fun for your kids, right? So, my husband sometimes nudges me towards taking some time to myself when he knows I'm kind of at my max, right? Because he knows that it's a way of nudging me towards taking care of myself is a way that he'll be taking care of all of us, right? And he'll be helping me take care of myself so I can take care of all of us, right? And of course, I make sure I take care of myself in this way because I know that it means I'm actually taking care of all of us. So when we do believe that, right, we do a much better job of taking care of ourselves, right? Honoring our sensitivity, right? And therefore we have more energy. We have more access to our deeply loving hearts. And we're truly like so much more delightful and delicious to be around. I really think we are delicious to be around when we're, honoring ourselves, when we're centered and calm and feeling good. So when we're believing that taking care of myself is taking care of us, the relationship, we don't overextend as much, right? And we don't build up nearly as much resentment and that sense of burden that can happen. So this belief is a beautiful one. And again, there's so much more there, as there will be with all of them, that we won't dive into right now. But you can kind of think about it more deeply if this one's a one where you're like, oh yeah, I haven't really been believing that fully. All right. Number 2. Our love is big enough to hold the moments of difficulty, the way the vast ocean holds a tiny white cap. Yeah, I got all poetic on you on that one. Hey, that's me. I'm kind of a poet at heart. So I'll say it again. Our love is big enough to hold the moments of difficulty, the way the ocean holds a tiny white cap. Yeah. So when we don't believe this kind of metaphor, right? When we don't believe that our love is strong enough to, how else do I put this? Not in a poetic way, that it's big enough that the difficulties are just little blips. That's the other way I like to say that they're not a problem really. When we're not believing that, I've noticed like my clients and myself, like in the past, we freak out about conflict, right? About moments of feeling annoyed at each other, right? Or grumpy with each other. And, ultimately we fall into what I call the fragile relationship syndrome, which is really it's like thinking that every upset might signal the end of our relationship, right? Like we're feeling on thin ice. The relationship's on thin ice, right? That, so we just tend to be a little what happens then is we start taking all the little problems more seriously, like thinking they're a much bigger deal than they necessarily are. And that actually, as you could probably imagine, ultimately leads to more drama and more upset, right? Because if every little thing is like life or death of the relationship, then you have a lot at stake and the emotions get really elevated, right? So, I mean, it looks like a difficulty. It really is like when a little difficulty comes up and we're not believing that that's kind of okay, right? We're going to have that much more of a problem because we have a problem with the problem. We have a problem with the fact that there's a problem, but the problem doesn't need to be a problem. Yeah. So when we do believe that our love's big enough to hold the difficult moments, the way the ocean holds a whitecap, then the little and even the bigger bumps that inevitably come along in a relationship really just don't feel like a big deal. They're not a problem. They might not be fun, right? But they're not a problem, right? They don't shake our sense of security in the relationship, right? And that's huge because when our security is stable, it allows us to feel so much safer. It allows us to feel safe and relaxed in the relationship. And when we feel safe, when we feel relaxed around such things, when we feel that, that deep security, we actually have access to way more of our wise brains, to our hearts, right? To our lightness, our sense of lightness and joy, right? And this actually makes the relationship overall lighter, more laughter filled, right? And truly that is it allows the relationship to have less bumps, less white caps, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because I like to say deep enjoyment of each other, and we could put different words in there, like lightness, joy together, safety with each other, right? All of those things are like insurance for the difficult moments that inevitably come up in partnership. Yeah. So I'm super excited to share my next podcast episode with you. It's an interview with my client, Lauren, and she began believing this during our coaching together. And it truly made all the difference in her relationship. And yeah, so she'll tell you about that in her own words in the next episode. And she also discovered, out of all of this too, for her, she started to believe in this next belief that I have here for you. Of course, I have too. I believe this deeply. Here's number 3, constructive conflict. And we could even get rid of the word constructive. I just put it there because it's kind of nice. Leads to more understanding and closeness and an even stronger marriage. So let me say that again. Conflict leads to more understanding and closeness and even a stronger marriage. That's right. Now, many people don't believe this. But it's really similar to the last one I just shared. But when we believe that conflict shouldn't happen or is bad, which is kind of what the belief that most of us subscribe to, right? Maybe that's just a sort of under the surface kind of belief for you or for many of us. But when we're believing that, we actually create a lot more negative emotion for ourselves, right? Which actually charges the conflict up, right? It makes it more of a big deal, like I was talking about in the last one. it can really put us into like a trauma response. We can get really hijacked by that animal creature, the inner lizard, as I've called it before. Really our fight, flight, or freeze system, our nervous system, that primitive part of our brain and nervous system that really hijacks us into much more elevated, intense emotions where we're not really connected to like our more rational, wise, and more heartful part of us. Like, right? We're not connected to that part of us. And it can really make conflict into a much bigger deal, a much more major problem, and so much harder to navigate, right? So, and I think it can also lead to conflict being more common because this is really interesting. Like, we don't really readily address little issues when we're thinking conflict's bad, right? So we kind of maybe bury them away or just don't bring anything up that might lead to conflict when we're conflict averse, right? And that what happens is they build and they build under the surface until bam, right? And we explode, right? Or an issue that might have been really easy to deal with early on had we been okay with the idea that it might be uncomfortable and there might be a little conflict when we brought it up. It just gets worse and worse and gets harder and harder to navigate. Or maybe if we're pretty conflict averse, right? We avoid it and leave things unaddressed. And maybe it doesn't get worse and worse in terms of that issue, but distance grows and grows. And like honesty and actually really knowing each other goes out the window, right? And with that going out the window, so does love and connection too, right? And this is part of perhaps why some of us end up, feeling really disconnected and distant and intense. So when we do believe that conflict leads to more understanding and closeness and even a stronger marriage, all the opposite things are possible. So me and my husband, just to kind of illustrate this, are really calm in conflict. We actually, we can laugh together during the middle of a conflict, right? We can find them funny because we don't think of them as big problems. We don't see them as fundamentally a problem that we're having a little problem, right? We see them as helping us work things out that need to be worked out. So we approach conflicts pretty calmly most of the time. And if they do get a little heated, because, we have human emotions and we sometimes get triggered, we always know that we can handle it. And we always know that there's going to be new understanding, like enriched understanding, right? And closeness, like a new closeness on the other side, because we know each other that much better, right? We know and we've navigated something together, right? That's something that brings people close. Now, I'm totally not actually trying to say conflict is awesome, go seek it out. That's not what I'm saying. So we don't use this to go have more conflict on purpose, right? But when it comes up naturally, we don't avoid it and we let it help us glean more understanding and get closer and ultimately have that true sense that, our marriage is so strong because we can get through these things, right? And we come out even closer and even closer and even closer over time. All right, moving on. Number 4, saying no is sometimes the best gift to give to the relationship. Saying no is sometimes the best gift to the relationship. All right, this is also a huge one, especially for highly sensitive people. There's so much here, but I'm just going to be brief. When we don't think that saying no is okay to our partner, when we feel we need to please him or not upset him, I see this all the time. So be honest with yourself. if this is coming up, like you don't want to push his buttons, you don't want to set boundaries, you don't want to say no, you kind of just want to go along and make sure that he doesn't get his feathers ruffled, right? When we do that, we cross our own boundaries. We do things we don't actually really want to. And usually, whether you're aware of it or not, it makes us feel angry and resentful when we do that to ourselves. We feel unvalued, right? We feel unimportant on some level, but yeah, like kind of deep down, we feel kind of unimportant, right? Because this is what's going on. We are unimportant to ourselves. We are not honoring ourselves, right? We set up the pattern with our partner of being treated as someone who's just kind of living for him. And again, this isn't a conscious thing at all. So if you have trouble saying no, you might want to just like really investigate for yourself, right? Like we kind of set up this pattern as like, we don't even have our own will or our own desires, right? Or at least we're not committing to them, right? We're not living as if we do. Okay, so this is going to make you unhappy, and it's going to set up patterns potentially that are really unconducive to lasting happiness in your marriage. All right, when you do believe that saying no is sometimes the best gift to the relationship, you actually do live by your own values. You set boundaries that keep you emotionally and physically well, right? That's the point of boundaries. You are important to yourself, right? You pursue your own wants, your own desires. You give yourself what you need, right? You don't do the things you really don't want to do. And you show your partner how to respect you by you respecting yourself, right? When you say no to something you want to do, you don't want to do, that's an act of respect for yourself, and that teaches your partner to respect you. Super, super key. So let me just tell you a little story about this, maybe to illustrate this more specifically. My husband recently asked me about if I would attend to the dishes, basically, during the workday. Like if I'd deal with putting the dishes in the dishwasher during my workday, like after lunch. And I actually just said to him, no, that's not something I'm going to do. Because I know it's not my priority to have the sink totally clean by the end of the workday or at lunchtime, right? And I know that it will be harder to work on my mindset around that than to just wait until after the workday to do it, right? And I don't mind doing them when I'm done working, but I don't want the experience of like, oh no, I've got to do that going on while I'm trying to do my work and be with my clients and all that, right? I don't need that. So he didn't necessarily like my answer, right? But he accepted it because I was quite clear about it. And, ultimately he still gets what he wants, a not overloaded sink, right? At the end of the day. And he gets a wife who isn't burdened by extra things to do during the day, right? It's a win-win. And saying no can be that kind of gift to your relationship too. All right, number 5, I can't control him. I can only control me. And that is everything. When we don't believe this, that we can't control him, that we can only control ourselves, I see this one so much. We end up trying to control him is basically the result of this one, right? And we don't necessarily believe I can control him consciously, right? But I know what this is like because I'm totally a recovering control freak myself. So we never try to control out of malice. No, right? It's just out of fear and really not knowing another way to get what we want. Like, for example, a tidy house, or not knowing another way to feel how we want to feel, right? For example, cared for. So there's so much to say here. I'm definitely going to do at least one whole episode on control, if not multiple. But briefly, when we kind of don't understand that we can't control him, we try to control. We manipulate unconsciously, not on purpose. We nag, we coax, we complain, we demand, we criticize in order to kind of like shame him into compliance, into doing what we want to do. Now, again, I know this intimately because I see it all the time with my clients, not every client, but many, many. And this was my thing. And I still fall into this because, I'm recovering from this control issue. So if you listened to episode 7, Revolutionizing Men and Their Feelings with Casey, in love, right? Something like that. If you listen to that, you'll understand why all this control stuff totally backfires and hurts the relationship, right? One of the things, which we didn't necessarily talk about on that podcast episode, but I want to share here, is we tend to be kind of fall into being his mommy, our husband's mom, more like his mom than his lover, right? And like you can already just from that sentence, like know that this is not a good recipe for love, for romance and love, right? Or even like feeling like you're a team together, right? And he does not want to feel controlled, I guarantee it. He wants to feel appreciated and respected. So when we do understand that we can't control him, I can only control myself. We no longer kind of beat our heads against the wall trying to change a person who doesn't want to be changed, right? We take care of what we actually can take care of, right? What's actually ours to take care of, which is the way that we think and feel about him and about ourselves, and the way we think and feel about what he does do or what he doesn't do, yeah? And we really take charge of like interacting with him and approaching him about things in a way that actually works. Right? We ask for what we want in a way that he can really hear. Like we figure out what works in the way of communication. We learn how to actually effectively create what we really want in our relationship with him, right? And ultimately, because of that, we end up enjoying him and our love so much more. Right? Because we understand we can control ourselves, and that's huge. It's like where all the work is. There's this saying, it's like we can't actually work on a relationship, we can only work on ourselves. And that's kind of the same idea here. So of course I could go on and on about this, but let's move forward. I just want to remind you of the belief. I can't control him, I can only control me. And that is everything in a relationship. Number 6, he doesn't need to love and accept everything about me. I do. In other words, it's not his job to love and accept everything about me. It's my job. And when I take that job seriously, my marriage thrives. When we don't believe this, we rely on his validation and approval and his actions to show us that we are good and lovable, right? We people please him. We are not honest, right? We're not really our honest selves. We're not just being us, right? We pretend to be someone we aren't because we're looking for that approval, which we're not necessarily going to get unconditionally from him, right? And we're likely to actually try to control him more, right? Like criticizing him for not calling us more or complaining that he isn't complimenting us more. Now, I have seen this lots of times before, right? It's because we're trying to feel loved and accepted from him, right? We're trying to have him unconditionally love and accept us, right? So we kind of are like nag him about it, right? Or complain that he isn't, right? Because we just want to feel approved of. And, that can lead to also getting mad at him when he says anything a little bit critical, right? And it can lead to us kind of standing up for ourselves, by being kind of harsh or even kind of starting a fight, like, right? Or behaving in a way that leads to more tension and distance, right? When we're not believing that he doesn't need to love and accept everything about us. Right? Or and this is a big one, like we take his less than loving words really personally. I see this a lot with highly sensitive women. All right, so all of that's not great, right? Doesn't feel good, doesn't lead to a great relationship dynamic, causes lots of extra ouchy feelings. I've got little kids. Ouchie's a common word in my vocabulary. All right, when we do believe this, that he doesn't need to love and accept everything about me, I do, right? That's my job. When we believe that, we get to work fiercely loving and approving of ourselves, right? We don't do the internal disapproval thing, right? We learn to have deep approval of ourselves, and we start actually feeling so good about ourselves, like more deeply good about ourselves than ever. And this actually like super frees us up to stop all the things I said before, right? About when we're not believing this, and to truly start showing up with so much more grace and patience and respect and actually lightness. So my client, Lauren, who I'm again interviewing in this next episode, she talks about this as well. Again, in her own words, her own way. But I want you to listen in. If this might be a thing for you, I want you to make sure you listen to that episode next week and hear how she talks about it. It's really one of the most powerful shifts you can make to make your marriage amazing. Number 7, being the best person I possibly can in my marriage brings me the kind of satisfaction and fulfillment I can't get from anyone else. Pride and joy that's equal to, if not better than, being loved by someone else. Ooh, this is such a good one. When we don't believe this, which most of us don't, probably, at least on some level, we forget this anyway at moments, it's really similar to the last one. We try to get what we want from our outside of us, right? We try to feel good by getting our partner's approval, right? Or we focus more, we focus more on him and what he's doing or what he's not doing. We get in his business. I call it, we get in his business, right? We go onto his side of the road and forget about our own, right? We end up kind of in that control space, right? So that we can get him to do things our way, right? To provide the feelings that we want for us, to validate us, right? We really get caught up in him, in that out there. He's that person out there, right? We blame, we get needy. And we really just don't attend to our side of the street, which is the only place we actually have influence, right? So we end up helpless and ultimately maybe hopeless to improve things. Like we can't actually get much traction because we're not here in ourselves. We're out over there in his business. And this generally makes things worse and worse and harder over time. Now, on the other hand, when we believe that being the best person we possibly can, like, is the best thing, like it brings us the best feelings ever, right? We stop worrying so much about being loved by our partner, right? We stop making that the primary focus. And we focus on what we can bring and improve, what we can bring to the relationship and what we can improve upon, right? Internally, and how we show up. We feel fueled up to make things better. And it's like we empower ourselves to create the changes that we want, right? Even if those changes kind of come about in a different way than we originally thought. Like we thought maybe we'd get him to do the thing more, like come hug us more, but that actually isn't how we actually get the same result, but it's through a different means, right? We feel the love and feeling loved. We feel loving and loved, not necessarily from that, but from a different way, which is one of the things I teach on deeply, right? So we start to see we have real influence, right? Because things do start to change because we are changing. And that feels amazing. It makes us feel amazing about our own selves. Right? We, like more than another person, being who we want them to be and like showering us with affection and all that, we actually derive deep pleasure and joy from being the best versions of ourselves. It truly leads to the deepest fulfillment. Like, I know this because this is so much of my work in my own life, right? Because like deep down, all we really want, like deep down, what we really want is to feel a certain way. All of us. Like anything we do is about wanting to feel good, wanting to feel love, like all the good things, right? We want to feel love, we want to feel joy, right? And we give that to ourselves by becoming who we most want to be, right? There's just simply nothing else like that. All right, belief number 8. Putting work into my marriage is a privilege and one of the best things that I can do to heal the world and make a deeply valuable contribution here on earth. Love this one. When we don't believe this, though, we feel like it's kind of selfish and wrong to spend lots of time putting work into our marriage, right? Or focusing on it or wanting it to be better. We might not even let ourselves want to improve our marriage because like it's not like helping other things or it's selfish, right? That's, I think, the weird thing that we do to ourselves. We're like, no, it's selfish. Like to give myself what I want, to make myself happy, that's selfish. Right? To have the thing I've always dreamed of, this loving, supportive, secure relationship. Oh no, that's selfish. So this might sound, I'm kind of blowing this out of proportion. And if you have a trace of this, it might not be that extreme, right? But check yourself out, dig in that basement of yours, right? Because like truly, this can lead to, just little bits of this even, can lead to not putting in much focus, not a solid amount of focus into the relationship, into your own happiness. I mean, into your own well-being in general, right? And then the marriage will tend to go downhill over time. But when we do believe that putting work into our marriage is one of the best things that you can actually do to contribute valuably to the community, to the world, right? It's so motivating. It's like, oh, when I put work into my marriage, it actually helps the world. It ripples out and impacts the world really positively, right? Especially as highly sensitive people who care so deeply about the world. This is part of our trait. For most of us, we have this deep care for the world, for other beings, animals, people, nature, right? Most of us really want the world to be a great place. And we are compelled at some level to make a difference. When we believe that our work on our marriage is a gift to the world, that actually makes a positive impact on others, right? Like our children's lives, for example. That's such an obvious one, right? When our marriage is happy, our kids are so much happier. And their future wives and husbands will be so much happier. And their kids, right? Our community is better off because there's a healthy couple in it, right? And so on and so on. And we feel excited to do the work when we're believing this, right? And therefore, we, of course, reap the rewards of having done the work, a great relationship, right? Feeling so happy in our marriage, right? And of course, then we get to watch the impact that makes on the world around us. So, such a powerful belief. Now, I am going to put these beliefs in the show notes because I know I'm going through them kind of quickly. And I know for me, it's so helpful to have something written down. So I'm going to put the 10 beliefs in the show notes so you can actually see them written down. That will be helpful. All right. Number 9. This actually, I think, kind of connects up. I think the next 3 might kind of connect up. Number 9, having a marriage that I love is way more valuable than money in the bank because I derive true joy from it, which is the point of having money anyway. When we don't believe this, we spend, a lot of our energy on making money, right? We live to work. We don't invest time into our relationship. We don't invest energy into our relationship. And the relationship certainly fizzles from that. I mean, that's one of the big problems with relationships. We aren't focusing on them, right? We aren't investing in them. And we also don't invest money into relationship when it's time for professional help. And the relationship then fizzles even more. When we do believe that having a marriage that we love is more valuable than money in the bank, we actually do invest time and energy into it. And we use money when we can to benefit the relationship, right? We spend it on special dates and adventures and on developing like the real skills you were never taught, right? To have a great relationship. So for me, like I value it so much having a loving marriage that I've spent lots of money on coaching and right now I'm even investing money on sex coaching not because I have a poor sex life. It's actually really wonderful, but I know it can be even better, right? And like, why not? Amazing, right? Why not make it amazing? Like extra amazing. When we take this kind of approach where we do invest in our marriage, we truly do derive so much joy and pleasure from it, right? So money actually becomes less of a focus. We don't need a lot of it to make us happy because we already have that happiness, which is what we're going for anyway, right? That's what we're always wanting anyway, besides like food and shelter. We want to feel good. And a happy marriage is one of the best sources of feeling good in the world. I know, it's amazing. All right. The last one, number 10. My happiness with my partner is the foundation for everything else that I want in my life. Here's my poetry. It's like giving me a pair of wings from which to soar into all the other areas of life I want to. So I'm not going to go too deep into this one. This is kind of piggybacking on the last two. But it really helps when we believe this to value its hugely beneficial impact on your life, right? It helps you see that a healthy, happy marriage is one of the biggest assets in your whole entire life, right? A healthy marriage sets us up for success in all the other realms of life, right? In the realms of health, in financial security, right? 2 incomes better than one person hanging out with the kids, the whole teamwork deal financially. It sets us up for more success in our career and doing good in the world, right? Because we always have this like loving, stable home to come home to. That sounds funny. Yeah, it's just like this foundation. And that, like for me, it offers me so much courage. Like my marriage has made it so much more possible for me to quote unquote spread my wings and show up here on this podcast for you and coach people and build my business into this thriving business that I would have never thought to do without like the amazing sort of nurturing nest of my marriage. It's true. It sets us up for emotional health, right? Studies show that healthy relationships help us live longer, have less mental illness, and a much more healthy immune system, just to name a few benefits on health, mental and physical. So when we see that, like we value that deeply, right? When we see that, we value our marriages beyond just being something that's pleasant and pleasurable, right? It's the foundation for so much goodness in our lives. And when we value something, we give it our attention. We work to keep it and strengthen it, right? So this is a super motivating belief. My happiness with my partner is the foundation for everything else that I want in my life. I want to leave you with one more, which is a bonus, which is simply, he loves me. This is a belief you can cultivate on purpose. It might be the single most important one. I see in about 75% of my clients that they don't actually deeply believe this. On some level, like there's a part of them that doesn't believe it. They fear that he doesn't love them. And it messes everything up. It really does. Because then there's this like fragility at the center of the relationship, this fear at the center of the relationship, instead of the security and safety of trusting that you are loved, right? And love truly thrives in safety, in security inside yourself. So often, like with my clients, their partner totally loves them deeply, and they're just too caught up in their own fear brain. Right? They're just a little bit too much in that fear space and insecurity to see it, to know it, to receive it, right? And all it takes is deciding to see it. And then everything shifts, right? I see this time and again. When my clients start believing their partner really loves them, they start softening, like all the hard stuff starts melting. And most people actually feel loved when they finally just let themselves believe they are loved. Right? They start seeing how it's true. They start noticing little ways their partner has been showing up all along with love. The ways that he has been and is regularly loving them. So this is truly, truly powerful and simple. He loves me. Whew. All right, we got through them all for now. So if any of those had you going like, ooh, that's something I do, when I was sharing about how it impacted relationships when you don't believe that belief, those are some beliefs you could use some work on, right? And if you want to believe the helpful belief, but you don't yet, it's just time to get started to work. It's time to get to work building that belief. So here is a little starting place. Write down the belief that you want to start believing, and then look for evidence to support it. Right? Like if you were working on my relationship is one of the best things I can do for the world around me, that kind of belief that we talked about, you just ask yourself, well, what evidence do I have for that? So for me, if I were answering that, I'd write, when mom and dad are happy, kids are way happier, right? And healthier, and they have better marriages themselves. I kind of mentioned that one before. When my marriage is happy, I have more energy to put into work and do the things that give back, right? I actually show up more at work. When my marriage is happy, my friends come to me for advice, right? And with their marriages, and I'm able to actually really help them because I know how to have a happy marriage, right? Makes sense? So this is just evidence that you could find for when you're trying to build a belief. One more, being in a happy marriage inspires young people, right? And gives them hope for real love, right? Instead of all the jaded relationships that they see out there. So, we end up modeling healthy relationships to our community. So that's all like some really solid evidence that, working on our relationships is one of the best things that we can do for the world. So choose the ones that you want to develop on purpose and get to work finding evidence to support them. It's not that hard once you start looking. So, as I've shared before, we actually adopt unhealthy beliefs from all around us, right? We've all kind of by osmosis bought into some really unhelpful beliefs about relationships, and they are not truths. A belief is an idea, not a fact, all right? But what we believe totally impacts our lives tremendously, right? And it can make or break a marriage. I see it all the time. So why not choose beliefs on purpose that make marriages amazing, right? It will give you, purposefully choosing your beliefs will give you serious leverage over your experience in your marriage. All right, have a great week. Be oh so well. One of the best things about making changes in your marriage is that the littlest shifts that you make here and there add up to really big change over time. One of the best ways you can start inviting little shifts into your life, aside from listening to this podcast, is to get on my email list or follow me on Instagram, because I share in both of those places really regularly, and you'll be gaining access to wisdom and tips and advice and all sorts of help on the regular that will add up to, if you implement them and read them, big changes in your marriage. So to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Hannah Brooks Love Coach. And to get on my email list, you can go to lifeisworthloving.com. That's my website, and you'll find lots of places to hop on that email list. You can scroll right down to the bottom or grab the 7 most powerful phrases to deepen connection. And when you grab that, you'll automatically be put on my email list. Plus, you'll have that really handy little guide to help you communicate so much better with your honey. So I'll see you in one or both of those places.